Okay. So I think I'm not on an easy spot. The last presentation of the last panel of the last day of conference. It's probably the most comfortable, but I'll try to make it very short and probably not too painful for anybody. So yes, as Bridget was introducing, what I'm going to do is just present the basic structure of this project that is going to start at the Schuman Center in the next months. And just to give some basic information about this project in a nutshell, we start with important things. So the funding, this project has been funded under the European Commission Action Grant under the program Rights, Equality and Citizenship 2014-2020. And the specific topic that the call was referring to is to improve the inclusion of mobile EU citizens and their political and societal participation. And again, going back to what Bridget was mentioning at the beginning of this day, this morning, I want to underline here and to highlight that going back to the continuation, to give a nice sense of continuity between the EGPP and the predecessor, the UDO. I'm happy to underline that this project is going to be co-coordinated by, co-directed by the former UDO director, Alex Drexel. So in a word, in a sentence, this project is an online tool for the next European elections, specifically tailored for EU mobile citizens. So before going to see which are the two main pillars of this project, I'll spend a couple of minutes on the starting point of this project. So first of all, the factual context is that there is a growing number of EU mobile citizens. I'm not going to show some numbers of EU intra-mobility, but in any case, the EU citizens resident in a member state that is different of the one of their own nationality and citizenship is growing. And we know that EU mobile citizens have been granted the right to vote in the host member state in exactly the same ways as the one of which they are nationals. However, the point is that the starting point, and going back to the call, what the Commission is especially worried about is that the political participation of this EU mobile citizen is particularly and generally low. The potential factors that could have an impact on this are, first of all, that their access to participation in the host country has some factors that may be limiting this. So in terms of legal framework, voting infrastructure, and others. The second point, which sometimes, especially people like us in rooms like this, is the knowledge about the rights and the opportunities to participate. So some people who reside in a country which is different of the one of their own nationality, they may not be aware of the fact that they can cast a vote actually in the host country. And this also is linked to the level of political engagement of this citizen, of this mobile citizen. And also, and this is where the first pillar, the VAA, kicks in, the availability of political suitable options. So it might be the case that in the host country where they live, there might be some political offer that is actually closer to their preference. And this is some data from the latest Flash Eurobarometer 431 published in 2015 on electoral rights. The question here was framed in the way like, if you live or were to live in a country that is different of the one of your nationality, would you be more inclined to vote for? And you see that Europeans basically have no strong preference over for or against voting in European elections for candidates of their country of origins or candidates of the country of residence. So they don't have a strong opinion on this, and this is important for the project. So going back to the project, the two main pillars on which this project is going to be built upon is the first, an online voting advice application. And the scope, the purpose of this is that to allow the users who participate to match their policy preferences with the position of the political parties running for EP elections in all 27 member states. And we focus especially on electoral contexts in which these voters can exercise their voting rights. So the host country and the country of origin. And this is the first pillar. The second one is an interactive database that can inform this EU mobile citizen who take part in this online tool on their electoral rights. And this would allow them to compare basically the condition and the requirements for participating in the political process in both countries again. So now we'll take a look in more detail of these on these two pillars. So starting with the first, the VAA, I think most of the people around this table know what a voting advice application is, but just to be sure somebody doesn't know what it is, has no idea, or is not really sure about what a VAA is. Okay, no way, so we can kind of skip on that. So very briefly, a VAA is an online tool where the user has usually 30 policy statements on which he can give his agreement or disagreement in the very common 5-point scale. So this is how one of the questions looks like. It's 30 questions like this on various policy areas. And after the user has replied to all these questions, and after a part where he can also assign a certain level of saliency to each of these questions, the result is usually a political space like this. In this, usually on the horizontal axis, you have on the left being favorable to public intervention, so economic left, on the right being favorable to free market, so economic right, and usually on the vertical axis, you would have the being conservative or progressive in terms of civil rights. Even though now, for instance, for the Italian elections, there were 5 or 6 different VAAs out there, and some of them had a different choice. So they put on the vertical axis the being more pro or anti-European Union, but that's a different story. So this is basically what the user gets. He gets his position in this political space close to one of the political parties that are running for the election. This comes from a piece forthcoming on the Oxford Research Encyclopedia showing the sheer number, the percentages of people who say that they have used a VAA before the elections. And this doesn't count for the turnout, so it's people who then showed up for the vote or didn't. In any case, we see that in some country, especially Finland, Netherlands, and Sweden, we see that the number is quite high, like around more than 40 up to 50-something% of people, they say that they have used one of these VAA prior to the elections. So some, let's say, we can call uncontestable fact is that VAAs are actually valuable tools to help undecided voters to find their best matching candidates in our parties. And some previous research has shown that actually VAAs are considered in general helpful by those who use them. And also, and this links to what the previous presentation has shown in this roundtable, they can incentivize users who would have otherwise have refrained from voting to actually participate. So they can have a positive effect on voter turnout. This is basically the increase in predicted probability to casting a vote between VAA users and not users. So we see that in some countries the differences is up to 12%. So in general, if somebody has used the VAA, has a 12% possibility to show up at the polls. And this is something that is kind of relevant. And to go on the other side, from the, let's say, from the academic point of view, there has been, in parallel to this more and more diffusion of VAA among users, there's also been a proliferation in the academic community, both on papers that are based on VAAs and that cite VAAs. At the UI, in the last 2 European elections, we had 2 voting advice applications, and of course, and we are planning to have another one in 2019. And the project will be co-funded by the University of Lucerne. So this is basically the first pillar. And in terms of the second pillar, so in parallel to this, there will be some comparable information for the users between the country of origin and the country of and the host country in terms of the legal requirements that they need to vote, the bureaucratic procedures, the deadline and the important dates that the citizens have to respect in order to cast the vote in the two countries, and also other practical aspects that can be relevant. And another, I think, relevant thing, also mentioning what Ryan has said before about the possible language and linguistic barriers in this election, is that this part of the online tool will be available in both languages. So say a German is living in France, this information will be available in both languages. And for the implementation of this second part of SPACEU, we will of course rely on the network of the newly established Global Citizen Observatory, the Global CIT, that Rainer is co-directing, and also going back to what I said about the sense of continuity between the old UDO and the EGPP. I'm also glad to, to show that the first official project at the Schuman Center with the label EGPP on it also have such an important figure of the old UDO. So which are basically the key features that make our project, let's say, a bit different from the other. As I said, in every election, both at the national level and at the European level, there's a bunch of VAAs out there. So other VAAs will be for sure implemented in 2019. However, up to today, no VAA has ever been prepared with this idea of the explicit comparison between the two-party system, the one of the country of residence and the one of the country of origin. And even more importantly, of course, the information about the electoral procedures for somebody to cast a vote in both of these countries is available, is out there. But not everyone knows how to find this information. So this is basically the first online interactive tool that makes it very simple for a citizen to go there and see which are the different, let's say, procedural costs that are entailed in voting in the two countries. And the third element that, let's say, puts together the first two, is that this will be available in a single portal, which makes everything very, very simple for the user. And of course, this is something I haven't mentioned up to now, but this doesn't apply, of course, only for EU mobile citizens, but also for dual citizens. So in terms of the objectives of this project, we can divide them in two sets of objectives. The external one, so with the target group of the EU mobile citizen, will be to create, let's say, a more aware, European-wide and political active citizenry. And this links to what, again, Ryan has said before in terms of creating a true transnational political space. Because if more and more people using this tool can make an educated choice to vote in the other country than the one they would normally vote to, this, let's say, creates some interactions between these countries. And this would in turn lead to an improvement of political participation of EU mobile citizens that in turn can also give a boost to the social inclusion of the citizen, because if people participate in the political process, then they may also be more integrated in the social dimension. And finally, this has been said before, this would increase the turnout of elections in the EP. And this is in terms of the external output. Also, there's some, let's say, internal objectives in terms of the scientific output, because this would allow us to collect some data on a category, which is the one of EU mobile citizen, that has been kind of understudied so far in the literature. And also, since this project will be paired by a dissemination strategy, this would also probably lead to a multiplying effect that would have us to have more access to the VAA, so we'll get more and more data on this. And just the last slides on the timeline of this project. We will, in the next month, start with the setting up of the team of electoral experts to gather all the relevant information for the electoral rights and to translate them in the relevant languages. And we will do that using the pool of Global Sit. Then we will collect and translate the electoral law, probably in autumn 2018. Then for the VAA, we will set up the coders team, and then we will code the political position of the 27, of the political parties of the 27 member states. And finally, and again a nice synergy what has been said before, we will go live in March 2019, which is basically the beginning of what Steve has called the go-to-vote phase, which goes from March to June. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lorenzo.